I'm Dan Sullivan.
And I'm Joe Polish.
And welcome to 10 Times Talk.
Hello, this is Joe Polish.
And this is Dan Sullivan.
And welcome, everyone, to 10x Talk, 10timestalk.com, the place where we're going to share ideas and perspectives and conversations that will have you thinking about how to build and grow your business and your life in whatever area you choose 10 times.
Joe, last time we went into sort of the real psychological background and the emotional background, intellectual background to the whole concept of Genius Network, the brand Genius Network that you've been developing over the years and expanding over the years now is becoming a very powerful force. At your annual conference now, you have a waiting list of people who want to come, and you've got limited space. And I think that there's two things that work here. One is what I would call the technological transformation that's taking place in the world because of the impact of microchip tools and systems and networks is creating an entirely different way to do almost every kind of activity on the planet through networks rather than through the old hierarchical pyramids that were kind of a historical model for getting anything done. So that's one thing, but I think the other thing is that what the Genius Networking does, it kind of sends out the message to everybody. You don't have to be great at everything, but you do have to be really great at one thing. And then in a network form, link your thing that you're really great at up with what other great people are doing. And then you get a multiplication. It's not an addition of one ability to the other. It's actually the multiplication of one ability by another ability. And right from the very first time when you came into the program, I've personally coached 6,000 entrepreneurs in the Strategic Coach program, and the number of people who have been coached is into the tens of thousands in Coach. And right from the beginning, when you were in my workshop, I just said, this is the greatest connector I've ever met in my life. And that's been my constant message to you over the years. Joe, don't do this big circle. Just do this small circle, and this small circle will become bigger than you can possibly imagine if you're just willing to focus on the thing that you really do. You mentioned in one of the recent podcasts that Babs, who's my partner in life, said that you have an unusual ability to charm and disarm. And that's a jumping off point because there was a terrific coach, our friend Fabienne, who actually sat down with you and actually got you to analyze what it is that you do. And you came up with a formula, which is called the Magic Rapport Formula. Everything that the two of you came up together totally matches with my experience of who you are and how you operate in the world. So I thought today it would be very, very interesting for the 10 Times Talk listeners to actually go through this. And you'll actually send this out, Joe. So, I'm telling you, you're actually going to send this out.
Okay.
So this is a free offering. So I'm going to go through a free offering here. But first of all, before we start, just talk about what your session with Fabienne did for you, because I know it was really meaningful for you.
Well, Fabienne wanted me to participate in a teleseminar that she was doing. She wanted to interview me for all of her clients. And of course, Fabienne, joined 25K, and she was in Strategic Coach, and she's very smart. She asked me, how do you develop relationships with people? So, I just kind of talked about how I meet people, what I do, where I focus on, how I invest my time, how I'm trying to be, who's a drainer, who's not, what my intention is behind when I interact with somebody. And I went through this process with her, and I didn't have a name for it. At the end of it, she said, listening to everything that you said, I've broken it up into 9 different steps of what I've heard you say today, and I'm going to give it this name that I think explains what you do. It's the Magic Rapport Formula. And then she went through the whole thing. She's like, here's what you do. And I said, man, you nailed it. And that's how we came up with the Magic Rapport Formula. Mm-hmm. And since that time, by hearing other people give me feedback, which I love listening to useful feedback, I said, yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And, I've thought it through quite a bit since that time, and that's how I came up with the process. And so it's 9 ways to become, just a great networker and connector and rapport builder.
Yeah.
And I think these are methodologies that I'm happy to go through with you to build rapport.
Well, I think they're universally applicable too. It all comes in one package with you, but everybody's got their own unique ability, but you can certainly improve your approach to things and your actually performance and your results simply by, Anthony Robbins actually calls it mirroring and matching. If you see someone who's really great, see if you can imitate their behavior for a while until it becomes natural to you. So I'm just going to start off number 1, which is focus. And I'm going to read these off and then we'll chat just briefly. We've got 9 to cover, so necessarily we're going to have to cover these pretty quickly, but you've got a whole sheet that sort of describes them. So number 1, focus on how you will help them or reduce their suffering. So talk a little bit, because that seems to be completely 2 different thoughts there.
So helping someone or reducing their suffering, I sort of think of this as the not having the rental car treatment of other human beings. Meaning a lot of people will go and rent a car, or they'll rent a house or an apartment at some point in their life. And some people really take care of it. They don't drive over speed bumps at, 100 miles an hour. They don't trash the house when they leave. They actually attempt to not beat it up. And in some cases, if you're going to rent a house for somebody and you're a conscientious human being, you're not going to leave the place trashed or worse than it was before you were there. And in many cases, if you want to be really awesome, you're going to leave it in a better condition than it was. Mm-hmm. And so, focusing on helping people or reducing their suffering is a way to approach anyone you interact with. How can you leave them in a better state? Now, obviously, I'm not talking about some weird codependent way of every human being you interact with. It's your job and responsibility as another human being to, make sure everyone's better off. I mean, you can only do so much. Part of this is knowing where you can make an impact, where it even matters, and, what your obligation is. So ways to do this is being very Socratic. I mean, if you don't know how to focus on what people want, you simply ask them. Mm-hmm. One of the processes is just a 3-letter word, which I mentioned on the last episode, is to simply ask people where they're at, where do they have pain, where do they have discomfort, dysfunction, and that could be in the form of an opportunity if it's in business, or just like you're interacting with people that you really care about. Mm-hmm. If you have friends or family members and you just see them in a bad place, I mean, you're going to inquire, what's going on, what's wrong, and, how can I help? Sometimes helping is simply listening.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to be Mr. or Mrs. Advice Giver. It just means focusing on where they're at. And one of the things that you do so well, Dan, and I mean, I know we always give each other compliments here, is just getting people to express what's going on and getting clear in their minds is a form of helping someone. Yeah. I mean, if someone has massive debt, it's not your job per se to pay off their bills. However, if you want to be helpful to them, just even getting them to think about it. Because your great line, the problem is not the problem is how you think about the problem.
Well, the problem is people don't know how to think about the problem. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Joe, this really segues very nicely into the next one, because what you're talking about is every relationship, there's kind of an investment, and there's 3, you talk about 3 investments: invest time, money, and energy on relationships. And the emphasis there is on the word relationships. People invest time, money, and energy in all sorts of things, but often the thing that they invest in least is relationships.
Right. And at the end of your life, I mean, forget just money and business, all those is critical to money and business. I mean, who do you really care about? I mean, who will be there because they care about you? I mean, who are the most important relationships in your life, and are you nurturing them? Are you taking care of your own bed? I mean, where you're spending your time with, who are the multipliers? I mean, who are the people that make the most significant impact? You're going to spend time, money, and energy anyway. And if you do it in a very short-term transactional way, you may make money, you may get ahead, but if you use relationships as stepping stones and all you do is take, and your whole life is about withdrawals and not making deposits, you're going to be bankrupt in your relationships eventually. And one of the things I find, especially in today's day and age where technology creates the pace of how people live, people can spend more time on Facebook than they can spend with their spouse or with their team or with their children. And, you really got to look at what fields are you harvesting?
Yeah.
What makes the most difference? And, Dan, you know this as well as I do. I mean, the one area of business where discrimination is useful, and I don't mean this in a negative way, it's who you spend your time with.
Yes.
Because some people will drain you and they will take from you. And there's that whole saying, which I like, Zig Ziglar originally said it, you can get anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. And to a point that is true. You can spend a lot of time helping other people get what they want that will do nothing for you.
Yes.
And so you have to be selective.
This also, we're sort of changing number 3. So the first one is focus on how you will help them or reduce their suffering. Number 2 is invest time, money, and energy on relationships. But number 3 is be the type of person they would always answer the phone for. And there's so many messages in that one. I mean, it's such a short concept, but in some ways you could almost sum up the entire 9 points with that one, number 3.
Right. Well, and I think everyone's sort of had this experience. If you have caller ID or you have your cell phone, I mean, it could even apply to email, if you're looking at email or you're getting a letter, or someone's walking up to you. I mean, who is an energy charger, who really makes you feel good. And certain people, you're like, oh, no, not this person. Oh, you immediately send it to voicemail. And so you got to really ask yourself when someone is annoying you, well, what is it about them? Is it because they're a leech? Is it because they're a drainer? Is it because they're too demanding? There's that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And then Peter Diamandis has like Peter's laws. And one of them is the squeaky wheel gets replaced. Mm-hmm. And, there are just certain people that just everything about them is just not encouraging. It's annoying. And if you ever would call me up and I see Dan Sullivan coming across the phone, which of course is hard to know, I'd have to see it through Babs because you don't carry a cell phone. But the thing is, immediately if I'm available, I'm going to answer that call because I know that there's going to be some reward on the other side. And the reward is just connecting with someone that you do business with or someone that you like or someone that's encouraging you. And other people, some people, the only time, if you're young and you have a pickup truck, you have friends that will literally, the only time you hear from is when they're going to move and they need you to help them, move some furniture. There's all those sort of people in the world. And the best thing you can do is if they're family members, just pay to have someone else move their shit. Don't have it be you, but really, but you need to be that type of person. Yeah. If you're not getting what you want, why? Well, how are you annoying? Like, how are you interacting with people? If you can see that awareness in yourself, which is the hardest to see it in because most people are blind to it. My God, you can, talk about 10 times in your life. If you have important people that really can't wait to hear from you because of the value that you create for them, the type of person that you are, however you help them with their opportunities, with reducing suffering, however you want to frame it, those are the people that get ahead. Those are the people that if you die and you're going to have a big funeral, they're showing up because, this person's awesome. And that's how I think about it.
And number 4, this is kind of like, you can't go wrong with this, and it's number 4, and it's be useful, grateful, and valuable. That's just kind of, you've got 3 aces in your hand right at the beginning of the game with those 3.
Right. So if you want people to really go out of their way to think highly of you and to want to bring opportunities to you and refer you and continue to do business with you, let's take this as you're a service provider or product provider. Being really useful and grateful and valuable to your clients, following the referability habits. As show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, finish what you start, say please and thank you. Those are your referability habits, Dan. And using those in business, using that in your personal life. When you're sitting down with someone, one analogy I always use is I hang out with a lot of pretty successful, pretty smart people. And I'm in situations where someone needs help. And someone that's at the table or in the group has a contact or they have the know-how, and it's not going to hurt them. They're not going to lose opportunities by sharing it, and some people won't. They'll know exactly what this person can do, and they don't volunteer it. And I'll be like, why? Do you think you're giving up something? And I think people like that are stupid.
Well, I think it's scarcity, that they have a scarcity in their life. I'm really, really struck by how you can have some incredibly successful people, but they actually come from scarcity.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of those. There's a lot of those. I mean, this person running the country. And so one of the things that I think that is just as simple as asking yourself, how can I be useful? How can I be grateful? How can I be more valuable to my clients? How can I do this with my partner? How can I do this with my team members? And people have asked me a million times, how did you build 25K? I got 137 people that pay me $25,000 a year. How did you market it? And I was like, well, in the beginning, I didn't have a fancy sales letter. I didn't have a website. I didn't have anything. What I had is a bunch of relationships that I was useful to. They considered me valuable, and I was very grateful. And I called a handful of them and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting this thing. If I did it, would you do it? And these are people that I would call and ask them for business advice. And here I am having a conversation with them saying, if I organize and facilitate this high-level group, will you pay $25,000 a year for it? And every person I talked to in the beginning, I called about 10 people before I ever sent out an email or anything to other people to start the first group with 20 people, which is where I thought I would only keep it. I was going to do one group, 20 people. And then I realized I love it. All of them said, yeah, I would do that. And it's because throughout the years, I had basically built that trust because I had always been useful to those people. And therefore, when it came time for me to ask if they wanted to participate in something that wasn't cheap, that would not only require money, but it would require their time, their energy, their travel, they all said, yeah.
Yeah.
And I realized, this is just kind of how I'm going to do everything the rest of my life. And you have a great thing. Everyone, if they've never heard, how the best get better, they should order that from strategiccoach.com. You have a thing about the no entitlement attitude and about the, you're 100% responsible for everything in your life. And I think that I'm not entitled to anything if I can't create value for someone else, if I can't be useful for someone else. And so that's just how I think about that process.
Yeah. The next one, number 5, so I'm just going to recount from the beginning. Focus on how you will help them or reduce their suffering. Number 2, invest time, money, and energy on relationships. Number 3, be the type of person they would always answer the phone for. And number 4 is be useful, grateful, and valuable. And number 5 is the 21st century version of the golden rule. So treat others as you would love to be treated.
Right. And so, of course, I love to be treated with being acknowledged. I like being memorable, and don't do something to someone else that you want them doing to you. And so even my levels I have this weird form of sarcasm and kind of busting on people and messing with them, but it's different than being cruel. It's not making them feel like horrible as a human being. A lot of it is just kind of being chummy. And so I really want to wow people. And I want to have them constantly thinking about me. So I will occasionally send, and you do a good job too. You and Bev sent me this Joe Polish puppet that is like a puppet of me, which is really super funny. But it's just simply, it is the golden rule, but in this day and age where most people are sending an email or a text, make a phone call, send them a letter. And the other flip side of it is cutting ties with everybody that doesn't treat you the way that you want to be treated. If you really want to free your life up to have great relationships, get rid of all the shitty relationships. Get rid of all the lazy people. Get rid of all the takers that are only there because, they want something from you, but they're not willing to reciprocate back. And so it's really, it's being an awesome person and not allowing yourself to be mistreated by who you let into your house.
Yeah. One of the things that I believe, you asked me, how I look at the world, and my belief is that there's a wisdom about human affairs that goes back tens of thousands of years, but it has to be reformatted and it has to be expressed in modern terms if it's going to be meaningful to people. There's a lot of things that you do, Joe, that I've read about in Greek philosophy or I've read in ancient books, but people wouldn't read that philosophy and they wouldn't read those books. So people say, well, there's no new ideas. And I said, yeah, but a lot of the old ideas, if you express them that way, are really boring. So what you have to do is you have to bring them into the present and make them meaningful to people. But I have to say that Plato never said be the type of person who they would always answer the phone for. Plato wasn't big on phones at all. Those ancient Greeks, Twitter, Facebook, and nothing, they were just zilch on that. So, you got to appreciate the times you're living in.
Can I say something to that real quickly, too? Which, first off, I totally agree that it's completely funny. And if you use Twitter as an example, and you've read a great book, I mean, you could always send a tweet out over someone's book or on Facebook and acknowledge and tag the person. And guess what? I mean, even if you don't know them, they're going to be like, wow, thanks. Yeah. And people, for instance, if I write something or create something and I talk about someone favorably on a podcast, I will send them an episode and say, hey, by the way, I talked about you here. And people are like, wow, Joe Polish is super cool.
Yeah.
And that's not difficult to do. And I'm surprised how many people don't do it.
Well, that goes along with my point that the way technology has transformed really recommends networking as a personal skill.
Right.
Everything you're talking about here is actually multiplied enormously by the coolest technologies. It's interesting, but by being the best possible person, you can actually get multiplied by the most cutting-edge tools and networks and systems, kind of like winning on both sides today just by doing these things. All right, number 6, avoid formalities, be fun, memorable, not boring. And boy, if there's one thing that's my experience of you, that's number 6.
I think you can gauge the quality of many relationships by how much you laugh with each other. I mean, if you see people sitting across at dinner from each other and they're just not having a good time, I mean, that sucks. I mean, you can sort of sense the angst and the stress. And I think, for one, just lightening up. People sometimes make a mountain out of a molehill. And, we're human. We trip up. We don't always say the right things. People put on facades constantly. Corporate sort of culture, in my opinion, is just uptight and ridiculous and bureaucratic. And so I always want to use laughter. I want to make jokes. I want to have fun. I want to be chummy. If someone doesn't have a sense of humor, then of course I think they should be messed with and see if you can pull it out of them. And certainly, I do it in my interactions on video. I do it when I talk to people. I mean, if you see a hostess and they're working really hard and, just say anything, just kind of like compliment or make a joke or do anything just to put a smile on their face, because the world needs more sunshine and more laughter, and it's not going to do anything other than make people think favorably of you, and it makes you feel good.
Well, I should say this, that, we all learn from each other, but this number 6 is the area that I've probably personalized the most in terms of my own behavior. And I was thinking about you last week. I was in New York. We were staying at a hotel, and we got on, and the woman said, oh, I pressed the wrong floor. And she says, the second time today that I've done that. And I said, well, how do you feel about yourself when you've done that, making the same mistake? She said, I feel really lousy. And I said, you're going to have to do something really great today to overcome this beginning, And this is a complete stranger. And before I met you, I would never have done that. And, she just broke out in a laugh. And I said, you got to really work now because you've put yourself in a hole by pressing the wrong button twice. And she was laughing. She thought it was really funny. And I think before I met you, I might have thought that, but I wouldn't have done it. I call it punking. Joe's the great punker of the world. And I've got a list of Joe's top 100 punks. I look at them and I said, I'm not going to do it the way that Joe does it, but I can see some situations where I do that.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, first off, it's great to do that because it does make people laugh. It lightens up a situation where someone's kind of a little bent out of shape. And it does build rapport. I mean, these are methods of building rapport. One thing I always say to famous people is like, if you were getting a fight with so-and-so, do you think you could take him? And unless someone is completely void of a sense of humor, where occasionally you'll run into, but it's rare. I mean, I'm waiting for that moment where I like really set someone off. So part of it is not just what you say, but it's how you say it. And I'll tell you, it's worth practicing this. It's worth being chummy and messing with people a little bit. And, you can always err on the side of being conservative because you don't want to come across as creepy or you don't want to come across as a joke. But, man, talk about people just feeling really relieved when someone just is kind of fun. I mean, that's what kids do all day long. That's why they're always smiling and, that sort of stuff is, well, at least in environments where they're able to do that. Why not? I mean, it just works. And and if you need, you can always watch Punk'd on Netflix or something if you really want to get some sort of formal training in this. But, watch comedy shows, do things like that. If you really have a hard time with humor, I mean, go to some comedy clubs, go to some improv, take an improv class, and it will work wonders in your ability to interact with people.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah. Joe, the number 7 is very meaningful to me. So number 6 was avoid formalities, be fun and memorable and not boring. But number 7 is the word appreciate people. And the word appreciate is really, really interesting. I have a book out that's called The Gratitude Principle, and I said, gratitude is very, very interesting because another word that is used for gratitude is appreciate or appreciation. You appreciate people, and it goes along with gratitude, but on the other side, it also goes along with increasing the value of an investment. So in the gold market, gold appreciates, stock appreciate. And I've always said, well, the two actually work exactly the same, is that when you're grateful for someone, you actually increase the value of that person, both in their own eyes and in your eyes.
Right. You see, you're really good at explaining like the economic or agricultural definition of appreciation, versus depreciate. If you want your relationships to go down and depreciate, the best way to do that is to not appreciate people, not acknowledge them, and just constantly insult and criticize. So, when someone does something awesome, celebrate it. If you see somebody that's doing something really cool in their relationship, obviously do it. It goes back to be a fountain and not a drain. One thing that's really hard for a lot of people to understand, and even myself, is even when people are doing really stupid stuff, people's current level of evolution, most people are doing the best they can with the tools in their toolbox. And if you can throw in some appreciation tools into their toolbox, they're probably going to do a little bit better. They're probably going to be a little bit happier. There are lives that are saved simply because someone acknowledges somebody.
Yeah.
Someone shows them that they care. And when you see people, you know who your real friends are, not when everything's going well, and it's when things are going really crappy, and who is there to support you. And if you want to create a really strong network, appreciate people when they're least expecting it.
Yeah.
If things are going really well for you and the world is your oyster, a lot of people forget who helped get them there. And I see it constantly. I see very successful people that they take their teams for granted. They take their relationships for granted. And, it's the whole saying, be nice to people you meet on the way up. They're going to be the same people you meet on the way down. And if you keep appreciating them and being nice on the way up, there's a good chance you're never going to go down. And I just think it's a smart way to live.
Yeah. Joe, number 8, you're the master at this. I've never seen anyone in my entire life, and it's going on 70 years. I've never seen anyone who does number 8 better than you do, and that's give value on the spot. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, it could be the fact that I'm so impulsive that, I don't even think about it and have very poor boundaries, maybe. As soon as someone wants something or needs something, I have a tendency to kind of, like a cobra, like, boom, how can I be helpful here? And of course, I think I have a really good evaluation criteria. I know what I can and cannot do for the most part. I just don't overthink it. And so my definition of giving value on the spot is constantly, whenever I hear someone needs something, it's like, oh, okay, how can I connect them to a person, to a capability? So you take what we're doing here on 10X Talk. This is truly giving value on the spot. People can listen to this on iTunes, they can go to 10X Talk, and they can get all this valuable conversation on how to think about business in their life for free. When I was a dead broke carpet cleaner and I was trying to figure out how to market my services, one of the first things I did was education-based marketing, and I would offer a consumer guide to carpet cleaning. Even if people never hired me, my marketing actually taught them how to hire someone else.
Yes.
And by me giving them that value instantly, who did they know, like, and trust as quickly as I can get them to do it? I mean, the whole know, like, and trust is the quicker you can connect a person with value, the more likely that you're going to get what you want because you just gave them what they want.
Yep.
Give people elegant ideas. Help them make better decisions. Connect one person that's important to you a week with someone else who can solve their problem or help them reach their opportunity. That's just something that I do, and I can't imagine most people are capable of doing it if they just sit down and think, what's my stupid human trick, and how can I do more of it?
Yeah, well, one of the things, and I think it may be an insight that might be useful to you, Joe, is that what I've noticed is that you do in the moment what most people wish they had done afterwards.
Yeah.
You just have this ability to actually act right now and do the thing, and then people oftentimes, they won't do it in the moment. They'll get home or they'll be thinking about, geez, I should have done that. And I don't think you have much of that going on in your brain. First of all, because a half hour later you forgot that you were actually in this situation. So that actually, that may be your actual motivation.
Right. So I don't know if it's a great insight here on my part or if it's just the fact that I'm just little, I've got no boundaries.
Well, whatever. And finally, number 9, and Joe, we're coming near the end, but this is a terrific one because we live in a world that is in many ways being depersonalized by large structures, bureaucracy, technology where there's no people involved in everything. And it's a huge need that people have for personal contact. So number 9 is get as close to in-person as you possibly can.
Right. And, look, we both know from, me and you, Dan, are constantly surrounded by amazing, incredible human beings and entrepreneurs doing great stuff in the world. And you're the smartest person that I know. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to gauge smartness and stuff. From the things that are admirable to me, I mean, you got the goods and you have incredible insight. And you've read great books and everything. And even if someone was to read every one of your books, listen to every audio that you've ever done, going to Strategic Coach is going to be a much different experience because it's in person. So certainly the best experience that someone could have is in person. Now, void of doing that, we're more connected than we ever have been in history, and we're more disconnected personally because of technology. And so if you're going to interact, I mean, I'm a huge fan of shooting a video on my iPhone and sending it to someone or recording an audio. People will just text, they'll email, but they don't connect. I mean, they don't talk. You don't get the value of hearing the voice. And there's so much that you can convey. So if you can't be in person, get as close to being in person. Let them hear your voice. Let them see you. Facilitate groups whenever you can do that, group discussions and meetups to allow people to be in person and exchange ideas. But if you can't do that, you want to simply be as close to them as possible. I mean, I can accomplish more with a 30-second or a minute audio or video that I can send to somebody, that I can text to them or email to them, than if I was to sit down half the time and spend half an hour writing up or composing an email. I mean, and I just do it so much. And it's uncomfortable in the beginning because some people will say to me when they see me do this, I've never done that before. Well, if you do it 5 times, then you've done it 5 times. And if you keep doing it, guess what? I just had a doctor that I did an MRI on my shoulder because I've had shoulder pain. And we found that I have like an inflamed, I don't even know what the heck it's called, in my shoulder. And the guy sent me a 40-second video because I had sent him a video. He's like, man, you've got me hooked. And this is a very well-known doctor here in Scottsdale. So you got me hooked on doing these videos. I mean, what a great way. And he explained what my situation was on this 40-second video to me. And the other way that I would have done this in the past with him is we would have had to set up an appointment. It would have been nonsense. And so it was value on the spot, in person, as close as we can be. And this just works in all categories. When it's someone's birthday, I'm recording them a video, if I like them, and saying happy birthday. And I'm sending it off. And that's just kind of how I do it.
Joe, this has been fabulous. And I think anyone listening to this gets a much, much clearer picture of how you operate in the world and why you've been able to create Genius Network, the formal organization, but your Genius Network goes way, way beyond the people who are actually formally in the structure. And I think that on the one hand, they're all attractors. So there's a quality about your 9 rapport formula checklist. They're all attractors, but they're all multipliers too. It's just a very, very powerful kind of engine of growth and expansion that lies within these 9. Now, I said at the beginning, that anybody who would like to have this checklist, they can get a hold of it. So how do they do that?
Why don't we post it up on 10xtalk.com and we'll let people just download it right there.
Right.
Maybe we'll make them enter their name and email if we want to do that, or maybe we'll just put it there. We'll decide that after the fact. But people should go to 10x Talk, the number 10xtalk.com, and go from there. And if you start incorporating these things, share it with other people. One way to create value on the spot also is, now this is of course going to be self-serving for myself, but it also will be beneficial. Whenever you hear something, read something, come across something that is really useful, you share it with other people. Like I've referred a whole bunch of people into Strategic Coach as an example. Now, of course, Strategic Coach loves that I would refer people. You've referred a whole bunch of people into my Genius Network group. I love that. And most of those people will say, thank you so much for adding this value to my life. So if you come across a great book, go ahead and do it. And one thing to go even a little deeper, taking my Magic Rapport Formula, if you've not read Dan's book, The Dan Sullivan Question, go to Amazon and order that book, or go to strategiccoach.com and order that book, and it will give you a process of how to ask a particular question that really self-incorporates a lot of the things I talked about today with you asking me these questions, Dan, and then everyone will be more equipped to just improve their relationships a lot better. So, yeah, that's my suggestion.
Joe, a great in-depth exploration on kind of what makes you tick, and it's all good.
Yes.
It all passes the good housekeeping code of useful things in people's lives. So anyway, this was
awesome.
The two talks that we had about Genius Network out in the world, but just how it starts with you personally. These have been great podcasts.
Great. Thank you. And thank you so much, Dan, as usual. And to all our listeners, please make your comments. I'd love to hear what this meant to you and how you're going to utilize it, and anything else that you want to add. And share 10X Talk with anyone that you think would be useful to hear this, especially anyone in your life that you may have some of the tendencies that don't create rapport and maybe sort of a drainer and have the potential to be a fountain instead of a drain. Share this episode with them, and hopefully it'll make the world a better place. Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Joe.